My name is Daniel Monroe. I'm 34 years old. For the last 10 years, I've built my life around discipline, quiet ambition, and the kind of loyalty that doesn't flinch under pressure. I'm not the kind of man who flaunts his success. I grew up watching my father come home from the factory with dust on his face and pride in his chest. He taught me to let my work speak louder than my wallet. So, when I decided to propose to the woman I loved, I didn't buy a ring that screamed status. I bought one that whispered sincerity. Her name was Ava. She was luminous in the way people in magazines try to appear, polished, elegant, socially magnetic. But with me, she said, she found peace. We dated for 2.5 years. She'd seen me at my lowest. Those nights I stayed up writing code for the software company I launched on a borrowed laptop. She used to call me her silent storm. I believed her. I believed everything. I proposed to her on a rainy Thursday evening. It wasn't extravagant. No violinists, no fireworks, just the two of us under a city bridge where we shared our first kiss. I gave her the ring. Simple gold, hand-set sapphire, the same gem my mother once wore. It cost me 3 months of quiet saving. She opened the box, looked at it, and said nothing for a long time. Then she laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was sharp, almost cruel. She said, "Daniel, are you serious? This looks like something from a vending machine." I remember blinking. Not from the rain, but from the sting behind my eyes. She didn't say no. She just handed it back like she was giving back a coat that didn't fit. That moment froze me. Not because I was heartbroken, but because something inside me went still, very still. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just nodded, closed the ring box, and tucked it back into my coat pocket. That silence was the beginning of something she never saw coming. Because while she saw a cheap ring, I saw a mirror, reflecting exactly what she valued. And from that moment on, I knew I wouldn't chase her. I'd let my silence build something far more meaningful than any apology. I didn't tell anyone what happened that night, not even my closest friends. When people asked about Ava, I just said we were taking space. But inside, something was shifting. That laugh of hers, it echoed in places I didn't know had walls, and in that silence, I started revisiting everything she ever said, and more importantly, everything she didn't. There were signs, of course. I just hadn't wanted to see them. Like how she always hesitated before introducing me to certain people, or how she'd scroll through luxury ring accounts late at night, lingering a little too long. I'd chalked it up to fantasy, not expectation. But looking back, I realized she had been calculating, measuring me not by character, but by what I could afford. And maybe that was the hardest truth to admit, that while I had been building a life, she had been waiting for a lifestyle. Still, I didn't hate her. I couldn't. Ava hadn't stolen anything from me. I had handed it all over freely. My time, my trust, even my dreams. I thought love meant believing in someone no matter what, but real love, I was beginning to see, doesn't ask you to shrink just to fit into someone else's idea of worth. And as painful as it was, that moment under the bridge had torn off the blindfold I'd tied on myself. The days that followed were quiet but heavy. I buried myself in my work. The same startup I once built from my bedroom had just landed a major investor, the kind of deal that could flip everything. Still, I said nothing. Not to her. Not to the world. I wanted to see who would notice me without the shiny headline, who would stay without knowing the size of what I was about to become. Eva reached out once. Just a message, we should talk. I saw it, let it sit there. I wasn't cruel. I just wasn't the same man anymore. The boy who brought her a sapphire in the rain had disappeared into the silence, and in his place, a man was forming. One who didn't need to argue, one who didn't need to prove a thing. That's when I knew this story wasn't about her anymore. It was about me, about rising, not in anger, not in revenge, but in quiet, undeniable power. And when it came time to show her what she had walked away from, I wouldn't need to say a word. The beauty of being underestimated is that people stop watching you. Ava thought I'd vanish after the proposal, disappear into some dark spiral, maybe chase her, beg for another chance, but I did none of that. Instead, I poured everything into what I'd quietly been building. My tech platform, once just a side project in a dim apartment, was now on the brink of a national rollout. And I hadn't told a soul. Sometimes the best revenge is evolution without an announcement. I began mapping out the next phase of my company with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Pain has a strange way of sharpening your vision. I restructured our entire interface in 2 sleepless weeks, then negotiated a licensing deal with a major healthcare network. It was subtle but seismic. Overnight, we weren't just a tech startup anymore. We were a necessity. Investors began calling. Journalists started asking questions, and through it all, I stayed silent. Meanwhile, I heard whispers. Mutual friends mentioning that Ava was seeing someone new. The kind of man who flaunted designer watches and drove leased luxury. I didn't flinch, let her orbit the glitter. I had something better. Gravity. Real power doesn't glitter, it anchors. And every quiet choice I made was another stone in the foundation she never bothered to understand. But I didn't just want success. I wanted reflection, not just for her, but for myself. So I started preparing something behind the scenes, a public feature, an article being written about quiet tech leaders, disrupting the industry. The journalist had reached out weeks earlier. This time I said yes. But only on one condition. The piece had to focus on the company's story, not mine. I wanted the work to speak. I wanted the lesson to arrive without noise. There's something deeply satisfying about building while the world assumes you've stalled. The same people who once pitied you begin to wonder, the same ones who laughed, go quiet. And Ava, she hadn't messaged again. But I had a feeling she would, not because she missed me, but because eventually the truth always circles back to those who chose image over substance. So I waited, not with vengeance, but with calm certainty, because I wasn't chasing her anymore. I was designing the moment she'd see me again, and realize she had laughed at the very thing that was about to change everything. The article dropped on a Wednesday morning. It wasn't flashy, just a clean profile in a well-respected publication about the rise of minimalist tech solutions and the minds behind them. My name was there, tucked quietly between quotes about innovation and persistence. A photo of me in my office, sleeves rolled up, eyes steady, no bragging, no mention of wealth. But the subtext was clear. I had arrived. And I had done it without making noise. I didn't post it, didn't share it, but it spread anyway. People tagged me. Former colleagues reached out. Old professors sent congratulations, and sure enough, that afternoon my phone buzzed. Ava, saw the article. Congrats. Can we talk? I looked at the message for a long time. I could feel the undertone, the shift in her perception. I had moved from memory to mystery, and mystery to someone like her is magnetic. I replied simply, "Hope you're doing well." That was it. Polite, distant, measured, and that was all it took. Within hours, she sent another message. Then another. "I've been thinking about you. I didn't handle things right. I made a mistake." The irony wasn't lost on me. She had once laughed at a ring, thinking it measured my value. Now she couldn't ignore the weight of what I'd built without her. I didn't gloat. I didn't remind her of what she said under the bridge. I let her unravel on her own. Her messages grew longer, more emotional. She said she felt lost, that her new relationship was shallow, that she missed our conversations, that she missed me. But what she really missed was comfort, was the sense of being next to something that was real, stable and rising. I understood it, but I didn't owe her anything anymore. My silence became my power. Every message I didn't send said more than words ever could. I was showing her, without bitterness, what it meant to lose something you once held carelessly. And in that loss, I wanted her to understand the weight of her own choices. Not because I wanted revenge, but because clarity is the sharpest mirror you can ever hold up to someone who underestimated you. In truth, I had already grieved what we had. What I was giving her now wasn't rejection, it was reflection. And watching her struggle to process it was the quiet justice I never had to orchestrate. She was falling, not because I pushed her, but because she realized too late that she'd let go of the only hand that wasn't pretending. Ava began showing up at places she knew I might be. Quiet cafes, old mutual friends events, even my company's open conference. She'd smile like nothing had ever happened, pretending we were on good terms, trying to spin a new story, but I saw it in her eyes, desperation dressed as charm. It wasn't about love, it was about access. To me, to the man she once believed was beneath her, to the life she had walked away from. One evening, I was speaking at a tech leadership panel, and I caught her sitting in the second row, dressed impeccably, nodding along as if she belonged. After the talk, she approached me with a look that tried to blend nostalgia and apology. "You've really built something incredible," she said softly. "I always knew you would." I smiled, not out of warmth, but out of clarity, because that wasn't what she had said when she walked away. And she knew it. "I appreciate that," I said. "I hope you're doing well." No bitterness, no invitation, just firm, respectful distance. That was all it took. Her face faltered, just slightly. She had come expecting the door might still be cracked open, but I had quietly rebuilt the house and changed the locks. She lingered for a moment, then walked away, and in that silence, I felt more power than any confrontation could have given me. I learned something powerful in those weeks. Sometimes the best justice is the kind that never raises its voice. It's not about proving someone wrong with noise. It's about becoming someone they can no longer reach, even when they finally want to. Ava had wanted the dream without the roots, and now she was drifting, watching the future she discarded bloom without her. There were moments I thought of confronting her, of laying it all out, the pain, the humiliation, the truth. But I realized that would have been for me, not for her. And I no longer needed that. What I needed was peace, and I already had it. I had surrounded myself with people who valued substance over sparkle. I was growing a company that solved real problems, and I had finally chosen myself, fully and without apology. What happened with Ava wasn't a failure. It was a filter. It revealed what couldn't stay, so that something better could rise in its place. And now, when I look at the life I've built, I don't see her absence as a whole. I see it as the very space that allowed everything else to flourish. There's something sacred about choosing not to explain yourself. I had reached a point in my life where I no longer needed to be understood by those who once misjudged me. Ava wasn't the only one who had underestimated me. There had been others, colleagues who scoffed at my quiet persistence, clients who took my underpricing as weakness, even friends who offered backhanded support. But now I walked through boardrooms with steady calm, and those same people shook my hand with new respect. Not because I demanded it, but because I earned it. I moved into a new place, overlooking the bay. Nothing extravagant, just peaceful, clean lines, bookshelves. I finally had time to fill. I made dinner for myself most nights, listened to jazz, wrote ideas in a leather notebook, People assume power looks loud, crowded tables, luxury posts, flashy circles. But real power, it looks like a man sipping tea alone, unbothered, unhurried, unmoved by anything except peace. And Ava, she kept trying. Messages now had a new tone, nostalgia, regret, even affection. She talked about what we almost had, as if we could rewind. But I wasn't interested in reliving something that had already taught me what I needed to know. What I wanted now were people who saw me when I had nothing, who would still be there when I had everything. She had seen the seed and walked away. Now that the tree bore fruit, she wanted a taste. One day, I finally replied, not out of emotion but clarity. I said, "You taught me a lot, Ava. Thank you. I hope you find what you're truly looking for." That was the last message I ever sent her, not because I hated her, but because I had finally understood the full lesson. Some people aren't meant to stay. They're meant to reveal what we will no longer tolerate, and who we are meant to become after we've healed. I gave the sapphire ring to my niece. She's 12 and fierce, with dreams bigger than anyone in our family can comprehend yet. I told her the stone had seen heartbreak, but also survival, that one day it might sit on her finger, not because of a man's promise, but because she herself had built a life worth celebrating. She smiled and said she'd keep it next to her drawings. And as for me, I began to smile more, laugh without the echo of being judged. I fell in love again, not with a person, but with the version of myself that survived, that rose, that didn't need to shout to be heard. The chapter with Ava was over, but the book was just getting interesting. In the months that followed, I focused on more than business. I began mentoring young developers, quiet students, single moms with side projects. They reminded me of me, back when the world barely saw me coming. I poured into them the lessons that Ava had unintentionally gifted me, lessons about boundaries, about worth, about never tying your value to someone else's inability to recognize it. I funded a scholarship at my old university, not under my name, but under my father's. I remembered his calloused hands, the pride he wore when he saw me typing behind that old cracked laptop. He once told me, "Don't try to be someone's everything, be your own foundation." I didn't understand that until Ava, until the laugh, until I saw the fault lines in love that is based on optics, not roots. One evening I ran into Ava's sister at a charity dinner. She approached me warmly, genuinely. "You look good," she said. "You seem lighter." I nodded. I asked how Ava was doing. She hesitated, then said, "She's trying to find herself. I think she lost more than she realized." I didn't ask anything else. I just smiled, wished her well, and walked back to my table. That moment, it closed the last door I hadn't even known was open. I started writing again. Not code stories, quiet ones, about resilience, about people who are overlooked, betrayed, then reborn. They weren't revenge fantasies. They were love letters to anyone who had ever been laughed at and still chose to rise anyway. Strangers began messaging me, telling me how my words helped them through heartbreak, business failures, or toxic breakups. And I realized I wasn't just healing. I was helping. Love came eventually, slowly. She didn't wear diamonds or talk about status. She asked questions no one else had ever asked. She didn't care what car I drove. She cared about how I handled silence. That's how I knew. And when I told her the story of the sapphire ring, she didn't flinch. She just said, "Sometimes a laugh breaks you, sometimes it saves you." And in that moment, I realized I had written my own ending, not with rage or revenge, but with peace. And in doing so, I'd become someone no one could throw away again. I used to imagine what I'd say to Ava if we ever had a proper goodbye. Maybe I'd remind her of what she said under the bridge. Maybe I'd show her a bank statement or a list of achievements. But now, I didn't need any of that. She already knew, and more importantly, I no longer needed her to know. That's the real power, when your peace no longer depends on their understanding. The man she once dismissed had become a force, not because of ego, but because of purpose. Every early morning, every skipped party, every moment I questioned my own path, it all added up, and now, when I walked into rooms, people stood, not because of what I wore, but because of what I carried. Quiet endurance, and a soul that didn't fold. People think betrayal is the end of something. But it's not. It's a threshold, a doorway into becoming. Ava had unknowingly opened that door, and though she shut it on her way out, she didn't realize I had learned to build new ones, in better rooms, with people who didn't flinch at simplicity or mock sincerity. My company was now international. We had partnerships across 3 continents. I sat in meetings with people who used to overlook me, but I never bragged. That wasn't the point. The point was that I had done it without ever stepping out of integrity. I had done it while staying soft, staying kind, staying honest. That's rare, and I was proud of it. One afternoon, I received a package with no return name. Inside was a letter from Ava. Just a single sentence. You were never cheap. I just couldn't see real worth. I folded it gently and placed it in a drawer, not to remember her, but to remember how far I'd come from needing anyone to validate me. And with that, I walked out onto my balcony, breathed in the stillness, and smiled. I had been laughed at, rejected, dismissed. But I had chosen myself, and that made all the difference. There's a moment when you realize you're no longer trying to prove anything. That moment crept in slowly for me, not with applause, but with quiet. I used to chase approval of lovers, of clients, of strangers in the room. But now I chased alignment, and when I started living that way, the world around me shifted. The laughter stopped, the assumptions quieted, and in its place came respect, deep, often unspoken, but unmistakable. I no longer feared rejection. I welcomed it, because every door that didn't open taught me which ones were worth knocking on. And when Ava rejected that ring, she didn't close my future, she unlocked it. I wonder if she understands that now, if she ever walks past that bridge and hears echoes of the moment. Everything could have been different, but I don't wonder with sadness. I wonder with peace. I've met many people since Ava, some with ambition, some with beauty, but only a few with both humility and vision. Those are the ones I keep close now. I don't offer rings, I offer time, presence, partnership. And the woman I'm with now, she never asked what something cost. She asked what it meant. That's how I knew I was home. One day, someone asked me if I ever regretted proposing to Ava. I said no, because without that rejection, I would have never walked this path. I would have never learned that peace is more valuable than proof. That self-worth doesn't need to be announced, and that sometimes the people who walk away are clearing space for what's meant to grow. Every night, I still pass by that drawer, the one with her letter. I never throw it away, not out of sentiment, but as a quiet reminder. People will always project their limits onto you. Your job is not to believe them. And when the world finally stops laughing, you'll hear your own voice again, clearer, stronger, ready. This is not a revenge story. This is a rebirth story. I didn't destroy her. I didn't outshine her. I outgrew her. And in doing so, I reclaimed something more valuable than any diamond, my dignity. I learned that you don't need to burn bridges. You just need to stop crossing the ones that lead nowhere. My silence was my strategy. My patience was my plan. And my growth? That was the quiet storm. The one that didn't need to announce its arrival, but left everything changed when it passed through. She'll remember that storm. Not with fear, but with awe, because the man she dismissed didn't become bitter. He became better. I still believe in love, but now I believe in love that sees you in the struggle, not just the spotlight, in partners who don't need to be impressed, just understood. And when I do propose again, it won't be to prove anything, it will be to build something, with someone who laughs, not at the price, but in joy. To anyone who's been laughed at, rejected, or made to feel small, remember this: the laugh is not the ending, it's the ignition. Let it light your way forward. Let it push you into greatness. So quiet it echoes. But when they come back, because they always come back, you won't need to say a thing. Your life will do the talking. The thing about building quietly is that your legacy begins before you even notice. I wasn't trying to be remembered. I was trying to live with integrity, but something strange started happening. Young entrepreneurs began quoting my work. People I'd never met cited me in lectures, and investors brought up my journey in boardrooms as an example of resilience. I never asked for that, but the universe seems to echo back the energy you release without ego. One of my junior employees asked me after a meeting, "Did you ever wish you'd shown her what you've become?" I paused, not because the answer was unclear, but because it was too simple for most to grasp. I did, I told him, by becoming it. There's no need to flaunt what you've built to those who dismissed you. The life you live, the peace you walk in, that's your billboard. Ava saw it. That was enough. I launched a fund to support underrepresented founders, people with stories like mine, whose ideas were overlooked because they weren't loud enough. I called it the Sapphire Seed, a quiet tribute to that night under the bridge. That moment, that laugh, became a spark that now lit torches for others. Funny how what breaks you can one day become your offering to the world. But I didn't share the story publicly, not the proposal, not the rejection. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted strength. I wanted the work to speak louder than the wound. Ava had been a chapter, but legacy is a book, and I was still writing mine with steady, deliberate ink. I sometimes wondered if she knew how far the ripple had traveled, if she ever saw the articles, the fund, the faces of people who were now building because I didn't quit. But then I'd stop myself, because Ava was not the point. The lesson was, and I'd already learned it, never let someone else's shallow vision shrink your divine purpose. And that truth, that clarity, it's what I offer now to everyone who sits across from me in quiet pain. You don't have to retaliate, just rise. And rise so completely that even your silence humbles those who once thought you were forgettable. I met her on a flight, of all places. She was reading a book I loved, an old hardcover, with the pages marked by handwritten notes. She wasn't wearing anything flashy, just a calm expression, a confident stillness. I didn't speak right away. I watched how she treated the flight attendant, how she smiled at the child behind us kicking the seat. There was grace in her restraint, and that's what drew me in. We talked softly for hours, as if the plane's hum demanded we speak only truth. She never once asked what I did. She asked what I loved, what I feared, what I learned from pain. When I told her about the ring, she didn't blink. She just said, "Then that ring was never the problem." I could have fallen in love with her in that moment alone. Her name was Camille. She ran a non-profit for young women in tech. She spoke with conviction but didn't need to convince. She wasn't interested in who I used to be or who had laughed at me. She was interested in who I was becoming when no one was watching. That's how I knew this time was different. This wasn't redemption. It was resurrection. I didn't propose quickly. I didn't try to impress. We built slowly. Dinners, walks, ideas shared across rooftops and grocery aisles. And when I finally gave her a ring, it wasn't expensive, but it was meaningful. A recut sapphire, set in platinum, the same stone that once came back to me in shame, now offered in full peace. She cried when I gave it to her. Not because of the gem, but because of the journey. This stone has already lived a life, she whispered. Now it can rest. I knew then. Love isn't about being chosen. It's about choosing each other every day, without condition, without performance. And as she placed it on her finger, I felt nothing but stillness. No ghosts, no echoes. Just a man who had walked through the fire and come out whole. Years later, I received an invitation to a local business awards gala. One of the finalists was a lifestyle startup, ironically, Ava's. She had started a brand built around curated elegance and meaningful luxury. The name rang familiar, but I had never looked into it. I wasn't sure if attending was wise. But Camille encouraged me.
Go,
she said. Not for her, for you, to see how far you've climbed. I walked in without a suit, just a navy blazer, worn leather shoes and peace. People shook my hand, greeted me with warmth. Ava saw me from across the room, eyes pausing on the woman beside me. I didn't need to say a word. She smiled, small and tight. I nodded once. We both understood. Her company didn't win the award, mine did. When I went up to accept it, I didn't mention her, or the past, or the laugh. I simply said, sometimes rejection is redirection. I thank every closed door that led me here, and I meant it. Fully, quietly, completely. Camille squeezed my hand as I stepped off the stage. That was beautiful, she whispered. That was the real you. And it was. Because when you stop needing applause, your voice finds its truest tone, one that carries further than any microphone ever could.
Ava approached later. She congratulated me. She said she was happy for me.
Her eyes looked softer, maybe even genuine. I thanked her, no bitterness, no resentment. Just gratitude for the role she unknowingly played in the man I'd become. Sometimes life brings things full circle, but if you've grown, if you've healed, you don't return to the same point. You come back higher, wiser, and whole. I tell this story now, not to revisit the past, but to offer a light to anyone who's still in the middle of it. If someone's laugh broke you, if a word, a dismissal, a look shattered something you had built with care, I need you to know that wasn't your ending. It was your unveiling, the beginning of your truest self. There were nights I thought I'd never get here. Nights when I questioned my worth, cursed my silence, even resented my softness. But now I see those qualities weren't weaknesses. They were the very things that made me unbreakable. Loud people look powerful, but quiet people, they build kingdoms while the world sleeps. To the man saving for a ring, to the woman wondering if she's enough, to the soul trying to stay kind in a world that rewards cruelty, don't stop. Keep building. Keep believing. Your story isn't over. And the moment that broke you will one day become the line that defines your strength. I look back now, not with pain, but with reverence. Every stumble, every silence, every betrayal carved me into who I am. And that man, he's no longer afraid to be misunderstood. He's too busy creating meaning. If you're reading this or hearing it, know this: you don't need revenge. You need restoration. And that starts by choosing you over and over again, even when no one else does. These days, peace greets me before success ever does. I wake up slowly, with no urge to prove anything. I walk barefoot in the mornings, water my plants, answer emails when I feel ready. Camille and I laugh often, not because everything is perfect, but because we're no longer pretending. The love we have is not loud, it's steady, and that steadiness is what I once mistook for boredom. Now I see it's the very definition of safety. Ava's chapter taught me many things. But perhaps the greatest lesson was this. Not everyone is meant to walk the full journey with you. Some are there to teach, others to test, and the rare few, they stay. Not because you impress them, but because you're real, even when no one's watching. I used to think justice looked like public success. Now I know it looks like private joy, unshakable peace, a heart that doesn't need explanation, a life lived on your terms, quietly, steadily, without the weight of resentment. And if I ever hear someone laugh at another's effort, their offering, their heart, I'll remember that night under the bridge. And I'll remember who I became because of it. Not to gloat, but to remind myself that even the most painful dismissal can become the root of something extraordinary. So here I am, no anger, no need for closure. Just a man who stayed kind, stayed quiet, and still won. Because peace, that's the final, most undeniable victory of all.